Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare
Hi, Krishna, everyone. Welcome to Youth Jam. Thank you all for joining today. We'll get started right away with announcements, and it would be really lovely to see all of the beautiful faces behind your cameras. So if you can turn on your camera, that would be great. Hi, Rian. Hi, Raj. Hi, Shaurya, Mayuri, and Keshav. So today we'll get started with our prayer. And how this works is one devotee usually nominates another to make the prayer. And if you need a reminder of the format for the prayer, we can also put it in the chat. Would anyone like to make this nomination? Okay, Brad just nominated Rian. Rian, are you there? Or Mayuri? Mayuri, would you like to make the prayer?
Sure. Dear Radha Madhav, if you so desire, please help this youth jam go successfully. Your sincere devotees from Youth Jam.
Thank you, Mayuri. That was such a sweet prayer. So today we'll be going through our shlokas first, and that will be Ishopanishad, and then we will go on to read a purport from there, and we'll also have a small discussion, and then we'll read back to Godhead magazine, I believe, and then our Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. With that, I will pass it over to Brajaras Bhavana.
Hare Krishna. We'll get started with our Ishopanishad reading. And so feel free to, one second, actually. Feel free to raise your hands if you want to be a part of the shloka reading, if you feel comfortable. We'll do 4 each, and I'll get us started. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Ishavasya Idam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Magrida Kasya Swedhanam Kurvaneveha Karmani Jijivishe Chatam Sama Evam Twayi Nanyate Tosti Na Karma Lipyate Nare Asurya Namate Loka Andhena Tamasavrata Tamste Pretya Vigachanti Yeke Chatma Hanojana.
What is this? Anejadekam manasojaviyo nainadeva apnuvan purvamarsat tadhavatonya tishtat tasminapo mantarishvadhati tadaijati tannaijati tadure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasyasya bahyata yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanu sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato navijugupsate yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaiva bhutvijanatah tatra ko mohaka shoka ekatvam anupashyatah.
Saparajak Chukramakayam Avranam Ashnavidam Shuddham Apapavidham Kavir Manishi Paribu Swayambhur Yatha Tato Pratan Vidacha Svati Pyasamabhyaha Andam Klama Pravishanti Ye Vidyamupashate Tato Bhuya Evate Tamo Ya Uvidya Yamrata. अन्यदेवाहुर्विद्यया अन्यदाहुरविद्यया इति शुश्रुमधीराणां येनस्तद्विचक्षिरे विद्यं च यस्तद्वेदो भयं सः अविद्यायां मृत्युं तीर्त्वा विद्यायां मृत्युम् अश्नुते.
Would anyone else like to recite some of the shlokas? We're a small group today, so if you don't feel super comfortable, you can give it a shot. No pressure. All right, I'll keep going. But if someone raises their hand, feel free to chime in. Andam tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya evate tamo yau sambhutyam rataha anyadevahur sambhavad anyadahur sambhavad iti shushru madhiranam yenastadvichachakshire Sambhutim cha vinasham cha yastadvedo bhayam saha vinashena mrityum tirtva sambhutyam mritamashnute hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam pushan napavrinnu satyadharma yadrishtaye pushan ekarshe yamasurya prajapatya व्यूहरश्मिन् समूह तेजो यत्ते रूपं कल्याणतमं तत्ते पश्यामि योऽसावसौ पुरुष सोऽहमस्मि वायुरनिलममृतम् अथेदं भस्मान्तं शरीरम् ॐ क्रतो स्मर कृतं स्मर क्रतो स्मर कृतं स्मर अग्नेनय सुपताराय अस्मान् विश्वानि देवा वयुनानि विद्वान् युयोद्यस्मज्जुहुरानमेनो भूयिष्ठां ते नमोक्तिं विधेम श्रीशोपनिषत् सम्पूर्णं हरि ओम्. Now we'll read a translation and purport. Mayuri, since your hand is raised, sorry I missed you. Would you like to choose one of the verses to read?
The 18th verse.
The 18th verse? All right, let's do it. I'll pull it up. Could you read us a translation and the purport?
O my Lord, as powerful as fire, O omnipotent one, now I offer you all obeisances, falling on the ground at your feet. O my Lord, please lead me on the right path to reach you, and since you know all that I have done in the past, please free me from the reactions to my past sins, so that there will be no hindrance to my progress. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. By surrendering to the Lord and praying for His causeless mercy, the devotee can progress on the path of complete self-realization. The Lord is addressed as fire because He can burn anything into ashes, including the sins of the surrendered soul. As described in the previous mantras, the real or ultimate aspect of the Absolute is His feature as the personality of Godhead, and His impersonal Brahma Jyot, their feature, is a dazzling covering over His face. Fruitive activities, or the karma kanda path of self-realization, is the lowest stage in this endeavor. As soon as such activities even slightly deviate from the regulative principles of the Vedas, they are transformed into vikarma, or acts against the interest of the actor. Such vikarma is enacted by the illusion living entity simply for sense gratification, and thus such activities become hindrances on the path of self-realization. Self-realization is possible in the human form of life, but not in other forms. There are 8,400,000 species, or forms of life, of which the human form qualified by Brahmanical culture presents the only chance to obtain knowledge of transcendence. Brahmanical culture includes truthfulness, sense control, forbearance, simplicity, full knowledge, and full faith in God. It is not that one simply becomes proud of his high parentage. Just as being born the son of a big man affords one a chance to become a big man, So, being born the son of a Brahmana gives one a chance to become a Brahmana. But such a birthright is not everything, for one still has to attain the Brahmanical qualifications for himself. As soon as one becomes proud of his birth as the son of a Brahmana and neglects to acquire the qualifications of a real Brahmana, he at once becomes degraded and falls from the path of self realization. Thus, his life's mission as a human being is defeated. In the Bhagavad Gita 6.41 to 42, we are assured by the Lord that the Yoga Brahstas, or souls from the fallen from the path of self-realization, are given a chance to rectify themselves by taking birth either in the families of good brahmanas or in the families of rich merchants. Such births afford higher chances for self-realization. If these chances are misused due to illusion, one loses the good opportunity of human life afforded by the Almighty Lord. The regulative principles are such that one who follows them is promoted from the platform of fruitive activities to the platform of transcendental knowledge. After many, many lifetimes of cultivating transcendental knowledge, one becomes perfect when he surrenders unto the Lord. This is the general procedure. One who surrenders at the very beginning, as recommended in this mantra, at once surpasses all preliminary stages simply by adopting the devotional attitude. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 18.66, the Lord at once takes charge of such a surrendered soul and frees him from all the reactions to his sinful acts. There are many sinful reactions involved in karma kanda activities, whereas in jnana kanda, the path of philosophical development, the number of such sinful activities is smaller. But in devotional service to the Lord, the path of bhakti, there is practically no chance of incurring sinful reactions because a devotee of the Lord attains all the good qualifications of the Lord himself. What to speak of those of a Brahmana? A devotee automatically attains the qualification of an expert Brahmana authorized to perform sacrifices even though the devotee may not have taken his birth in a Brahmana family. Such is the omnipotence of the Lord. He can make a man born in a Brahmana family as degraded as a low-born dog eater, and he can also make a low-born dog eater superior to a qualified Brahmana simply on the strength of devotional service. Since the omnipotent Lord is situated within the heart of everyone, he can give directions to his sincere devotees by which they can attain the right path. Such directions are especially offered to the devotee even if he desires something else. As far as others are concerned, God gives his sanction to the doer only at the risk of the doer. But in the case of a devotee, the Lord directs him in such a way that he never acts wrongly. The Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.42 says, Sapadamulam bhajata priyasya Tyanyabhavasya hariparesha vikarmayakchopaditam katanchit dunoti sarvam hridi sannivishtaha. The Lord is so kind to the devotee who is fully surrendered to his lotus feet that even though the devotee sometimes falls into the entanglement of a karma, acts against the Vedic directions, the Lord at once rectifies such mistakes from within his heart. This is because the devotees are very dear to the Lord. In this mantra of Sri Ishopanishad, the devotee prays to the Lord to rectify him from within his heart. To err is human. A conditioned soul is very often apt to commit mistakes, and the only remedial measure to take against such unintentional sins is to give oneself up to the lotus feet of the Lord so that he may guide one to avoid such pitfalls. The Lord takes charge of fully surrendered souls. Thus, all problems are solved simply by surrendering oneself unto the Lord and acting in terms of His directions. Such directions are given to the sincere devotee in two ways. One is by the way of the saints, scriptures, and spiritual master, and the other way is by the Lord Himself, who resides within the heart of everyone. Thus, the devotee, fully enlightened with Vedic knowledge, is protected in all respects. Vedic knowledge is transcendental and cannot be understood by mundane educational procedures. One can understand the Vedic mantras only by the grace of the Lord and the spiritual master. Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tata gurau. If one takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, it is to be understood that he has obtained the grace of the Lord. The Lord the Lord appears as the spiritual master for the devotee. Thus, the spiritual master, the Vedic injunctions, and the Lord Himself from within all guide the devotee in full strength. In this way, there is no chance for devotee to fall again into the mire of material illusion. The devotee, thus protected from all around, is sure to reach the ultimate destination of perfection. The entire process is hinted at in this mantra, and Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.17 through 20 explains it further. Hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord is itself an act of piety. The Lord wants everyone to hear and chant His glories because He is the well wisher of all living entities. By hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, one becomes cleansed of all undesirable things, and then one's devotion becomes fixed upon the Lord. At this stage, the devotee acquires the Brahmanical qualifications, and the effects of the lower modes of nature, passion and ignorance, completely vanish. The devotee becomes fully enlightened by virtue of his devotional service, and thus he comes to know the path of the Lord and the way to attain him. As all doubts diminish, he becomes a pure devotee. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Ishopanishad, the knowledge that brings one near to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna.
Thank you, Mayuri. That was a wonderful reading that you did. We need to get you reading more often. That was really nice. Do you want to give us a quick summary, Mayuri, of what we just read over there? This is a very important purport that you picked.
I think it's mainly talking about how whenever a surrendered soul gives his surrenders to Krishna, whenever a devotee surrenders to Krishna, then Krishna takes control of his activities and makes sure that this devotee never sins. And he also, as it says, Krishna is described as fire in this verse because he removes all the sinful reactions for the devotee.
That was a great summary. Thank you, Mayuri. Any other reflections from this purport? It's a nice purport because it's also Prabhupada's conclusion to the Ishopanishad. After discussing all the different mantras in this last mantra, he talks about this last mantra, but also just the entire book as a whole. Any other reflection? Rian, did you have your hand up initially?
I had it, but if I don't get a chance, I think it's still fine.
Oh, okay. It was for reading. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Any other reflections from the purport? I was reflecting on one of the points where Prabhupada was explaining how the soul is protected after the surrender by both the spiritual master, the gurus, the scriptures, and then also by the Lord within them, within that person, where the Lord Himself gives inspiration, He gives guidance, and He's able to protect the soul from being right next to them. So I found that very nice to know where there are two sides of it, where even if we are not in the best place to approach someone, the Lord can help us from within. All right, I think if there are no other reflections, I will hand it off to Abhay, the next section.
Yes, so we'll be reading a Back to Got It article, an old one that Prabhupada wrote. The title of this is called Scholars Deluded. If you would like to read, please put your hand up. Everyone can read 2 paragraphs here, 3 paragraphs. All right, I can start. Yes, sorry. Is this better? Okay. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, description of the Supreme Truth is given as follows. Janmadyasya ton ayaditara tosh chortasvayam tor chortasva bhinyasvarat tene brahmaridhamya adhikavaye muhyanti yat suraya तेजोभैर्हि जता विनिमयम् यत्र त्रिसर्गं मृषा धम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहका परं सत्यं धीमहि. Bhagavatam 1.1.1. This realization of the supreme truth was achieved by Sri Vyasadeva by the initiation of Sri Narada. When Sri Vyasadeva was unable to achieve perfect satisfaction, even after his compilation of many scriptures like the Vedas, Puranas, Vedanta, histories like the Mahabharata, etc., when he was not satisfied, Sri Narada, who was a spiritual master, advised him to narrate the transcendental absolute personality of Godhead, his name, fame, qualities, and pastimes, which are identical with the absolute truth. As such, Srila Vyasadeva then sat on his sanctified seat at Shamyapras, near Vadrikashram, on the Himalayas, and sought in meditation by his spiritualized vision the Supreme Lord and his illusory energy, called by the name, thank you, that works, called by the name of Maya, who keeps all conditioned living beings captivated by her three qualities. By such transcendental realization, only Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the beginning of that transcendental narration, he offers his obeisances to the Supreme Truth, who is the Parama, or the Transcendence. The Supreme Lord is described as the Swarat, or the complete in himself. He is not like so many mundane lords who are all dependent on one another and are conditioned by the laws of nature. He is realized by one who has achieved success in the Gayatri Mantra, chanted by the intelligent class of men, the Brahmins. The word Dhimahi is particularly used here for this purpose. Dharani Radha, would you like to go?
The Supreme Truth is described here as a sentient person. His cognition, emotions, and volitions are pre-existent prior to the creation of cosmos because he has initiated the primeval teacher Brahma, who was enlightened by him only prior to the cosmic creation. The Supreme Lord's knowledge is therefore different from that of the mundane scholars, and the technical name of this transcendental knowledge is called Sambid, energy described in the Vishnu Puranam. Sambids, Sandhini, and Ahladini are three different manifestations of the internal potency, which is described by the Bhagavad Gita as Atma Maya, or the internal potency. This Atma Maya is different from the Gunamoyi Maya, or the external potency of three modes. Atma Maya is also called the Paraprakriti, which is distinct from the Aparaprakriti, or the inner matter. In the Atma Maya, which is distinct from the material nature, there is no scope for illusion. In the material nature, there is illusion, like the mirage in the desert. There is the illusion of accepting a rope for the snake or water as a glass, and vice versa. The creation of Atma Maya is the absolute word. The creation of the Atma Maya is the absolute world, where nothing is different from nothing is different from nothing, or everything is non-different from everything. In that region, the rope and snake are the same thing, and therefore there is no illusion at all.
One more paragraph.
Okay, sorry. The absolute world is the source of the material world. The absolute world is the source of the material world, or the relative world, and as such, the relative world is a perverted reflection of the absolute world. In the perverted reflection of the material world, everything is created, maintained, and lastly destroyed in the long run. But in the absolute world, nothing is created or destroyed, but everything is unborn, beginningless, and eternally existent. The Supreme Truth has therefore three different energies, primarily, namely, 1, the internal potency, 2, the marginal potency, and 3, the external potency.
Mary?
Where there is no illusion of the rope, and the snake is the place of the internal potency, and where there is such illusion of that of the mirage of the desert is the creation of the external potency, and the living entities who are either controlled by the internal or the external potency of the Lord is called the marginal potency. All these potencies are different energies of the Supreme Lord as light and heat is to fire. These potencies are therefore emanations from the Absolute Truth, who is the personal controller or master of all mystic powers displayed under different headings of energies. The personality of Godhead is therefore called as Svarat or and Parama, or the self-sufficient Supreme. When the Supreme Personality therefore descends as by his Atma Maya, he does not become as one of the so many conditioned persons either. Neither he is different from his personal form as it is in the case with the living entities. It is wrong, therefore, to compare the personality of Godhead with ordinary living beings or artificially elevate a living being to the level of the Supreme Person. The Supreme Person's being not affected by external potential different modes is described as follows. Bhagavad Gita 11:138.
Brajas Pavan, would you like to read?
Etad ishanam ishasya prakritistopi tadguni na yuyate sadatmasthir yatha buddhi tadashraya. Especially of the personality of God, it is that he is never under the condition of the material nature. And in the same way, a living entity who is spiritually enlightened by the grace of the Lord is also never attracted by the modes of nature, although such living being is within the jurisdiction of the material energy. But it happens so that a neophyte spiritually inclined person who is sometimes deluded by the external energy and considers sorry, I think I'm not able to see the screen anymore.
Oh, sorry. Let me reshare. Can you see it now?
Yeah. Okay. But it happens so that a neophyte, spiritually inclined person is sometimes deluded by the external energy and considers the personality of Godhead as one of the conditioned souls who are embodied by the conditions of the material nature. One mendicant, Sri Madan Mohan Brahmachari, met Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, the great Indian philosopher and vice president of India. He was very kind to make a presentation of his book, the Bhagavad Gita, to the above brahmachari. The brahmachari read the above book, but he was not satisfied by it, because although the book is very scholarly edited, there are so many incongruencies for lack of transcendental realization, which definitely proves the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam, as even the gods are bewildered in the Supreme Person. Gods like Brahma, Shiva, Indra, etc., are also deluded sometimes by the supreme illusory potency.
You can read the next paragraphs.
The brahmachari, however, who met Dr. Radhakrishnan, was sorry to find out such delusion of a scholar like Dr. Radhakrishnan, especially when he read on page 254 of the book, the Bhagavad Gita of Dr. Radhakrishnan, a deluded explanation of the shloka number 34, chapter 4, BG. The exact words mentioned therein are as follows. It is not the personal Krishna to whom we have to give ourselves up utterly, but the unborn, beginningless, eternal, who speaks through Krishna. To be continued.
Okay. Yeah, it goes on to a next article, but for now we can just discuss this. Does anyone have any points that caught their eye or stuck in their mind? I always like hearing about the three different potencies of Krishna, especially when you see that the external potency is also a form of Krishna, because it helps put a lot of the world in context and seeing it through the lens of Krishna consciousness. And the verse in Bhagavad Gita where it says that all splendor in this world is but a spark of my splendor, where Krishna says that is very nice whenever I look out like at sunsets or nature and see it. And it reminds me of that verse that it's all just a spark of Krishna's splendor at the end of the day. Does anyone else have any other reflections that they'd like to share? Sharing is caring. Okay, if not, we can. Oh yes, go ahead, Roger Eswaban.
I was appreciating Prabhupada's writing style being very straightforward and direct, and he addressed the points that he wanted to make very quickly. And he was also very specific with the way he described situations. He was very vivid with his language. So I was just appreciating that, Prabhupada's language is very attractive, very striking always. And again, it was a type of writing that really captured your attention. And we can see that here in these like short form articles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I always like looking back at Prabhupada's older writings and seeing the like language and style. And another thing that I learned for these Back to Godhead articles, the early ones, he would go out and when he would sell it, people would ask him questions or challenge him, and he would go back home and write an article to that question or to that challenge. So he would directly answer what the world was asking for, which we see constantly with Prabhupada whenever all of the like perfect questions, perfect answers, he's always trying to respond, or the way that he would try to understand American culture and connect these Vedic concepts to that to explain it to us it's always nice to see Prabhupada elaborate, like explaining it in such a nice and direct way while making it understandable for us. And seeing the way that he like gives the English definitions for these things is also really interesting. And they're really like they help explain a lot of these concepts well. Okay, if nobody else has any reflections on this, we can move on the topic of Srila Prabhupada, we can move on to Prabhupada Lilamrita. Okay, we started off here, left off here. If someone can say which paragraph was it? Was it this one? Okay.
Yes.
Would you like to start reading, Mother Isaki? We
Yeah.
can do, let's do 4 paragraphs each.
All right. He also held kirtanas in the storefront. Like the lectures, the kirtans were serious, but they were not so formal. Prabhupada was lenient during kirtan. Visitors would bring harmoniums, wooden flutes, guitars, and they would follow the melody or create their own improvisations. Someone brought an old string, bass, and bow, and an inspired guest could always pick up the bow and play along. Some of the boys had found the innards of an upright piano waiting on the curb with someone's garbage, and they had brought it to the temple and placed it near the entrance. During a kirtan, free-wheeling guests would run their hands over the wires, creating strange vibrations. Robert Nelson, several weeks back, had brought a large cymbal that now hung from the ceiling, dangling close by the Swami's dais. But there was a limit to the extravagance. Sometimes, when a newcomer picked up the kartals and played them in a beat other than the standard 1, 2, 3, Swamiji would ask one of the boys to correct him, even at the risk of offending the guest. Prabhupada led the chanting and drummed with one hand on a small bongo. Even on this little bongo drum, he played Bengali mridanga rhythms so interesting that a local Congo drummer used to come just to hear the Swami gets in some good licks. The Swami's kirtans were a new high, and the boys would glance at each other with widening eyes and shaking heads as they responded to his chanting, comparing it to their previous drug experiences and signaling each other favorably. This is great. It's better than LSD. Hey man, I'm really getting high on this. And Prabhupada encouraged their newfound intoxication. As maestro of these kirtans, he was also acting expertly as guru. Lord Chaitanya had said, there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy name, and Prabhupada brought the chanting to the Lower East Side just that way. A kindergarten of spiritual life, he once called the temple. Here he taught the ABCs of Krishna consciousness, lecturing from Bhagavad Gita and leading the group chanting of Hare Krishna. Sometimes, after the final kirtan, he would invite those who were interested to join him for further talks in his apartment.
Brajaswalan, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. In the back room of his apartment, Prabhupada was usually alone, especially in the early morning hours, 2, 3, and 4 a.m., when almost no one else was awake. In these early hours, his room was silent, and he worked alone in the intimacy of his relationship with Krishna. He would sit on the floor behind his suitcase desk, worshipping Krishna by typing the translations and purports of his Srimad Bhagavatam. But as time came, but this same back room was also used for meetings, and anyone who brought himself to knock on the Swami's door could enter and speak with him at any time, face to face. Prabhupada would sit back from his typewriter and give his time to talking, listening, answering questions, sometimes arguing or joking. A visitor might sit alone with him for half an hour before someone else would knock, and Swamiji would invite the newcomer to join them. New guests would come and others would go, but Swamiji stayed and sat and talked. Generally, visits were formal. His guests would ask philosophical questions, and he would answer, much the same as after a lecture in the storefront. But occasionally, some of the boys who were becoming serious followers would monopolize his time, especially on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, when there was no evening lecture in the temple. Often they would ask him personal questions. What was it like when he first came to New York? What about India? Did he have followers there? Were his family members devotees of Krishna? What was his spiritual master like? And then Prabhupada would talk in a different way, quieter, more intimate, and humorous. He told how one morning in New York he had first seen snow and thought someone had whitewashed the buildings. He told how he had spoken at several churches in Butler, but when the boys asked what kind of churches they were, he smiled and replied, I don't know, and they laughed with him. He would reminisce freely about the British control of India and about Indian politics. He told them it was not so much Gandhi as Subhash Chandra Bose who had liberated India. Subhash Chandra Bose had gone outside of India and started the Indian National Army. He entered into agreement with Hitler that Indian soldiers fighting for British India who surrendered to the Germans could be returned to the Indian National Army to fight against the British. And it was this show of force by Bose, more than Gandhi's nonviolence, which led to India's independence.
Go ahead, Mahir.
He talked of his childhood at the turn of the century when street lamps were gaslit and carriages and horse-drawn trams were the only vehicles on Calcutta's dusty streets. These talks charmed the boys even more than the transcendental philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and drew them affectionately toward him. He told about his father, Gaur Mohande, a pure Vaishnava. His father had been a cloth merchant, and his family had been intimately related with the aristocratic Mullahs of Calcutta. The Mullahs had a deity of Krishna, and Prabhupada's father had given him a deity to worship as a child. He used to imitate the worship of the Govinda deity in the Mullahs temple. As a boy, he had held his own Rath Yatra festivals each year, imitating in miniature the gigantic festivals at Jagannath Puri, and his father's friends used to joke, "Oh, the Rath Yatra ceremony is going on at your home, and you did not invite us? What is this?" Then his father would reply, "This is child's play, that's all." But the neighbor said, "Oh, child's play? You are avoiding us by saying it's for children?" Prabhupada fondly remembered his father, who had never wanted him to be a worldly man, who had given him lessons in Mridanga, and who had prayed to visiting sadhus that one day the boy would grow up to be a devotee of Radharani. One night he told how he had met his spiritual master. He told how he had begun his own chemical business, but had left home in 1959 had taken sannyas. The boys were interested, but so ignorant of the things Prabhupada was talking about that at the mention of a word like mridanga or sannyas, they would have to ask what it meant, and he would go on conversational tangent describing Indian spices, Indian drums, and even Indian women. And whatever he talked about, he would eventually shine upon it in the light of the Shastra. He did not ration out such talk, but gave it out abundantly by the hour, day after day, as long as there was a real live inquirer.
Keshav.
became a dining hall and in the evenings a place of intimate worship. Prabhupada had kept the room with its 12-foot square hardwood parquet floor clean and bare, the solitary coffee table against the wall between the two courtyard windows was the only. Daily at noon, a dozen men were not taking lunch here with him. The meals cooked by Keith, who spent the whole morning in the kitchen. At first, Keith had only cooked for the Swami. He had mastered the art of cooking dal, rice, and sabji in the Swami's three-tiered boiler, and usually there'd be enough for one or two guests as well. But soon more guests began to gather, and Prabhupada told Keith to increase the quality, abandoning the small three-tiered cooker, till he was cooking for a dozen hungry men. The boarders, Raphael and Don, though not so interested in the Swami's talk, would arrive punctually each day for prasadam, usually with a friend or two who had wandered into the storefront. Steve would drop by from his job at the welfare office. The Mott Street group would come, and then there were others. The kitchen was stocked with standard Indian spices, fresh chilies, fresh ginger root, whole cumin seeds, turmeric, and asafoetida. Keith mastered the basic cooking techniques and passed them on to Chuck, who became his assistant. Some of the other boys would stand at the doorway of the narrow kitchenette to watch Keith, as one thick pancake-like chapati after another blew up like an inflated football over the open flame and then took its place in the steaming stack.
All right. Please raise your hand if you want to read. I'll go ahead. While the fine basmati rice boiled to a moist, fluffy white finish and the sabji simmered, the noon cooking would climax with the chants. Keith prepared the chants exactly as Swamiji had shown him. Over the fire, he set a small metal cup, half filled with clarified butter, and then put in cumin seeds. When the seeds turned almost black, he added chilies, and as the chilies blackened, a choking smoke began to pour from the cup. Now the chants was ready. With his cook's tongs, Keith lifted the cup, its boiling, crackling mixture, fuming like a sorcerer's kettle, and brought it to the edge of the pot of boiling dal. He opened the tight cover slightly, dumping the boiling chants into the dal with a flick of his wrist, and immediately replaced the lid. Pow! The meeting of the chants and dal created an explosion, which was then greeted by cheers from the doorway, signifying that the cooking was now complete. This final operation was so volatile that it once blew the top of the pot to the ceiling with a loud smash, causing minor burns to Keith's hands. Some of the neighbors complained of acrid, penetrating fumes, but the devotees loved it. When lunch was ready, Swamiji would wash his hands and mouth in the bathroom and come out into the front room, with his soft, pink-bottomed feet always bare, his saffron dhoti reaching down to his ankles. He would stand by the coffee table, which held a picture of Lord Chaitanya and his associates, while his associates stood around him against the wall. And Keith would bring in a big tray of chapatis, stacked by the dozens, and place it on the floor before the altar table, along with pots of rice, dal, and sabji. Swamiji would then recite the Bengali prayer for offering food to the Lord, and all present would follow him by bowing down, knees and head to the floor, and approximating the Bengali prayer one word at a time. While the steam and mixed aromas drifted up like an offering of incense before the picture of Lord Chaitanya, the Swami's followers bowed their heads to the wooden floor and mumbled the prayer. Prabhupada then sat with his friends, eating the same prasadam as they, with the addition of a banana and a metal bowl full of hot milk. He would slice the banana by pushing it downward against the edge of the bowl, letting the slices fall into the hot milk. You can read.
Prabhupada's open decree that everyone should eat as much prasadam as possible created a humorous mood and a family feeling. No one was allowed to simply sit, picking at his food, nibbling politely. They ate with a gusto, Swamiji almost insisted upon. If he saw someone not eating heartily, he would call the person's name and smilingly protest. "Why are you not eating? Take prasadam." And he would laugh. "When I was coming to your country on the boat," he said, "I thought, how will the Americans ever eat this food?" And as the boys pushed their plates forward for more, Keith would serve seconds, more rice, dal, chapatis, and sabji. After all, it was spiritual. You were supposed to eat a lot. It would purify you. It would free you from Maya. Besides, it was good, delicious, spicy. This was better than American food. It was like chanting. It was far out. You got high from eating this food. They ate with the right hand, Indian style. Keith and Howard had already learned this and had even tasted similar dishes. But as they told the Swami in a room full of believers, the food in India had never been this good. One boy, Stanley, was quite young, and Prabhupada, almost like a doting father, watched over him as he ate. Stanley's mother had personally met Prabhupada and said that only if he took personal care of her son would she allow him to live in the monastery. Prabhupada complied. He diligently encouraged the boy until Stanley gradually took on a voracious appetite and began consuming 10 chapatis at a sitting, and would have taken more had Swamiji not told him to stop. But aside from Swamiji's limiting Stanley to 10 chapatis, the word was always more, take more. When Prabhupada was finished, he would rise and leave the room. Keith would catch a couple of volunteers to help him clean, and the others would leave.
Go ahead, Myri, for the close.
Occasionally on a Sunday, Prabhupada himself would cook a feast with special Indian dishes. Steve, Swamiji personally cooked the prasadam and then served it to us upstairs in his front room. We all sat in rows, and I remember him walking up and down in between the row of boys, passing before us with his bare feet, and serving us with a spoon from different pots. He would ask what did we want? Did we want more of this? And he would serve us with pleasure. These dishes were not ordinary, but sweets and savories, like sweet rice and kachoris, with special tastes. Even after we had all taken a full plate, he would come back and ask us to take more. Once he came up to me and asked what I would like more of. Would I like some more sweet rice? In my early misconception of spiritual life, I thought I should deny myself what I liked best, so I asked some more plain rice. But even that plain rice was fancy yellow rice with fried cheese balls. On off nights, his apartment was quiet. He might remain alone for the whole evening, typing and translating Srimad Bhagavatam, or talking in a relaxed atmosphere to just one or two guests until 10. But on meeting nights, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there was activity in every room of his apartment. He wasn't alone anymore. His new followers were helping him, and they shared in his spirit of trying to get people to chant Hare Krishna and hear of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, thank you everyone for reading. I'll pass it over to Madhuri Saki for reflections.
Did anyone have any reflections from the reading that we just did, whether it's Prabhupada Lilamrita or Back to Godhead? Yes, Myri.
Bible. So
Go ahead.
I thought that in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, today's topic was more about like how even though the new devotees, they weren't really into Krishna consciousness. But now Srila Prabhupada is talking about how these devotees were starting to be attracted through the food. And I think I read somewhere that like in Krishna consciousness, we usually eat our way back to Godhead. And I thought that this was like more like relatable and easy for the new devotees to digest, and it helped and supplement their Krishna consciousness even more than like the chanting, because this was like a simple form that they could understand, and it was very effective in bringing Krishna consciousness.
Thank you for sharing, Myri. I really like your choice of words, especially like supplementing their Krishna consciousness. That was a wonderful way of putting it. Tari, rather.
Hare Krishna. I think that I just in the beginning of this reading, the like young men were comparing kirtan to LSD, and I was a little bit appalled because I was like, that's like you're talking about something spiritual and you're comparing it to drugs, and I was like, that's kind of sad that they had to like that they lived such a life that they all they can think about and all they enjoyed before was drugs, and then so now the best thing I can compare this to is drugs. But then also like I see like that kind of also proves just how like strong of an effect the Harinam had, because like in school you learn about how like horrible drugs are and how addictive they can be, and like knowing how addictive it is and how difficult it is to let them go, seeing the Harinam being compared to like something that some people derive pleasure from, something that's so addictive, is like, in a certain sense, it's just like good. It like shows how it's not just sentimental, like chanting or anything. It's like a meaningful practice.
Thank you for sharing. I also really like the beginning where Prabhupada would allow those that were engaged in the kirtan to just pick up and play instruments, but I think it said something how he was very like lenient, but still like acting as a guru. So even if it meant correcting them in the chance that they may be offended. But it was such a wonderful reading and chapter that we just read, or we didn't finish the chapter, but we did a lot of reading today. Are there any other reflections or realizations? It can be about the reading or just throughout the week, things you've been seeing, observing, or experiencing. Bye.
I liked Prabhupada always encouraging the devotees, or almost always encouraging the devotees to eat more. It goes back to Mayuri's point about we're eating our way back to Godhead, and how Prabhupada understood that it was like prashadam, and he's giving them prashadam. He wants them to actually eat it instead of, I think what most people, and even Satsarup Maharaj said in this, how he thought that to be like spiritual, he should abstain from eating. So he would ask for different food, like, but then Prabhupada would always try to encourage them and always try to make first class prasadam because it's spiritual food.
Yeah, I love that. Eating our way back to Godhead. Thank you, Mary and bye. Any other realizations? All right. Well, with that, I think we will wrap up today's Youth Jam session. Thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next week at 3 p.m. PST. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.